Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Krampus. Welcome back to Total Party Skills, and today I want to talk a little bit about the devil, or I guess devils in the context of Dungeons & Dragons, and the ongoing ancient debate about alignment and the use of alignment and how affixed various creatures have to be to their stated alignments in various monster manuals. This basically can be traced back to the very dawn of the game, as soon as the whole law versus chaos dynamic was thrown into the mix. But specifically, I remember in recent weeks, while my internet's been kind of acting funky, and I couldn't really comment on it too much, some stink that apparently they're going to have it set up so that, devils and various other classic evil monsters, of planar origin, can basically just be whatever alignment, whatever. Which, follows certain trends of, like they've been doing with, making attribute bonuses or ability score bonuses. It'd be something that, you can just put in whatever category you want, which would allow for, weird, unlikely scenarios of someone running around with a halfling with a strength of 20. Oh my God. One thing I've noticed from players is that they still tend to kind of self-select, ability score bonuses, that match the concept of the race they chose anyway. I've yet to encounter anyone who's done something like insanely outlandish with it, but that's not like a huge selection group, I'll admit. But the idea that someone out there wants to play a halfling barbarian with a strength of 20, I'm not really sure if that's really the worst thing in the world. It certainly will lead to a memorable character, even though it's obviously not something if you want a more serious George R.R. Martin kind of tone to your game. Devils, though, specifically, as being the topic of this video, the idea of a good devil. In limited quantity, sure, that's fine and has always been fine. The thing is I've said this in numerous videos, is all these things that are found in the monster manual in terms of monster stat blocks are supposed to be intentionally malleable. The whole reason why, D&D functions as a generic platform for all sorts of homebrew games and such is because you, as the game master, can look at these materials as guidelines and kind of a quick note shortcut to help run your game faster. But every little detail in it, you're allowed to change. The players, as long as they have consistent rules for how their skills and combat works, and that all their characters are made using the same qualifications. You use the same method of determining ability scores for everyone. You give everyone the same range of choices and all that kind of stuff. Then it's a fair game. You don't freeball things too much, otherwise it kind of gets out of the realm of being fair. You need to pre-plan things if you want to change some rules here and there. But the idea that you might occasionally have a devil that's on some sort of redemptive arc. The only real problem with that in D&D is that that's a bit too complicated of an NPC to really properly convey and get that all out without the NPC just kind of taking over the game and just being a GM insert. That would be kind of more of an appropriate thing for a player character, in which case that could be something to set up with a tiefling. But the idea of having the random evil fallen angel should be answered with the idea that occasionally you might have a devil that's decided to regret their great rebellion and is trying to lift themselves out of there. There's also because of the fact that D&D splits supernatural monsters of various hellish origin into two major camps, with demons and devils being different things. It's kind of more appropriate for devils because they're law aligned. They still have some sort of code of ethic that they do adhere to, even if it's more selfishly or harm inflicting on others, kind of an orientation that you get with the lawful goods or even the lawful neutrals, but it still puts them on an axis that makes it easier for them to climb up the alignment chart, so to say. Whereas demons, as being, chaos creatures, they're much more ruled by their passion and much more individualistic and much more likely to, stay rooted in whatever kind of sour existence they've created for themselves. But and obviously D&D's lore is not exactly the same as like our real world oral history idea of how devils and demons operate, which doesn't quite match what the source material in the real world even has to say about these things. And D&D certainly doesn't even match that. They've in the past made, you know, like conscious efforts to detach itself as much as possible from, you know, Judeo-Christian Abrahamic concepts of heaven and hell, while still, you know, having angels and that kind of shit in their games. So, but yet it's that homebrew malleability of D&D. Not every last single D&D setting, not even the homebrews, but even the published D&D settings have the exact same lore about these things. And so at times you do need to just kind of look at what that general pool of knowledge is. And much like how, you know, a lot of my arguments around orcs derive from the fact that the source materials, the actual real world source materials, not just what D&D has to say about orcs, is that they're really an elven race. Then, you know, devils are angels. I do actually find some things that are kind of discordant about how, like, just the general real world mythology about the devil and all that kind of stuff seems to operate, because the concept that they're in opposition somehow to heaven is kind of odd, considering that they're still functioning as instruments of heaven. You know, the people who are, you know, destined to go to the worse afterlife need their jail keepers and their tormentors. Otherwise, it's not a punishment, and so they still are functionally serving God. And yet, for some reason, we always treat them as if, like, the war is still ongoing, and, you know, and angels are out to get them. The thing in D&D, if you notice, it's the demons and the devils that are at war with each other across the outer planes, whereas the devils and the angels don't really, like, touch on each other's realms of influence. But they do kind of get along, and at least that's how I've always portrayed it whenever such things have come up in games I've run that have, you know, gone to a point where we're dealing with planar kind of issues, which hasn't been very often, let's be honest. Most of my time with the hobby has largely just been writing things that have never seen the light of day in the middle of the night for years on end. So anyway, I guess that's all there is to be said about that. Alignment has always been optional, and alignment has always been malleable. The listed alignment on creature stat blocks is always just been a suggestion and an indication of what the average would be, because the stat block is so you as the DM can run the damn game quick without having to stop and stat everything out yourself, like it would be if you were running, say, a Palladium game. So anyway, once again, I guess that's about it. Merry Krampus, and stay waspinated.